Friends, allies, and Americans, welcome to the Defense of Democracy podcast, where we tell the stories of folks who defend your children's rights by advocating for inclusive public school systems and who fight for diversity across our nation. I'm your host, Karen Swoboda. Let's get into it.
Hello, friends, families, and allies. Welcome to the Defense of Democracy podcast. I'm your host, Addison K. Witt, Poet Laureate of Defense of Democracy. This is where we bring together writers, advocates, educators, and everyday citizens to talk about what's at stake in America's classrooms, libraries, and communities. Today, my guest is Sabrina Baêta, Senior Program Manager with PEN America's Freedom to Read team. Sabrina is a poet, essayist, and writer who has dedicated her career to advancing educational access and fighting censorship in schools and libraries. Hello, Sabrina, and welcome to the conversation. I want to get right in. No,
so
you're great. Hello there.
You.
I'm well, and it's great to have you here. I want to get right into the conversation, and for weeks we have been focused on readout across America, book bans, and advocacy. And for many of our listeners who are supporters of Defense of Democracy, they may or may not know all the work that PEN America does. And for our listeners who may not be familiar, tell us about PEN America, what it is, and how did you get involved?
Yeah, I mean, we could make a whole new podcast for everything that PEN America covers. For me, in what we're talking about today, so PEN America is a literary and free expression organization. We're an author membership organization as well, so we represent authors. And we like to say we stand at the intersection of literature and human rights. So for us in the current crisis in our democracy, unfortunately, that comes with a lot of different fires nationally that we're looking at. So we have different wonderful colleagues here who are looking at higher education, who are looking at college, the climate of college campuses, but they're also looking at free expression for podcasters, like any kind of media form, essentially. And we also have international work that's looking at this and tying it together with the national picture, but is looking internationally and pointing out cases of censorship that are happening there, and at times even helping international authors who are facing censorship or even threats of violence and imprisonment. So it really, I mean, even to wrap my own head around everything PEN America does, but if you're thinking about free expression and you're thinking about how that applies inside the United States and outside of it, then you probably are touching upon something PEN America does. And for me, I'm part of the Freedom to Read team, which is specifically looking at K through 12 educational censorship and censorship in public libraries, which has largely looked like book bans. I colloquially call us the book ban team for that reason. To give you a sense of how this, this pernicious movement has grown, I was first joined PEN America on a 3-month contract as a researcher to answer the question, are book bans happening in the United States? And this was back in early 2022. And they were looking at the academic year for 2021 to 2022. And unfortunately, I have way too much job security, and we have a whole team around us. And it's still here, 4 years later. So that question was very quickly answered that it is happening. But that's really how I got my start. Because weirdly enough, there is no college degree for book ban researcher. I've checked. I kind of fell into this work of both research and advocacy around trying to prevent and reverse book bans in K through 12 public schools.
First of all, great on job security. One. But the fact that we're even in this inflection point, and this is where we are in the United States of America, where freedom of speech, freedom of expression, the rights to choose have been so fundamental to the laws, the platforms, the beliefs, the values that we have stood for, and that this is our fight at this time. It just blows us all away. And I think it has been really easy to take it all for granted. And now it's boots on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, the way you just said it, boots on the ground, is absolutely what we need, because this feels distinctly un-American, right?
Mhm.
To somebody's perception of like American ideals and who we are as a nation, democracy, freedom. I mean, these are all words that are supposed to be associated with American culture. And diversity, like melting pot, like all the different things that can be challenged one way or another as to whether they're really accurate to describe our country. But it's supposed to be agreed upon that that's what we have a really strong First Amendment and free expression and free speech rights. So to see that be so heavily attacked, but then to also see those attacks just garner so much success. Like, it's not that these principles haven't been attacked over, you know, the history of our country, but the
Right.
fact that now they're gaining so much ground and they're being painted in some patriotic sense, that's what's, deeply feels deeply un-American, to what we're used to in thinking about our own rights.
You said there is no specific degree for book banning and fighting that cause. I do know that you come to this work not only as an advocate, but also as a poet and a writer yourself. And how does your creative background shape the way that you approach this advocacy right now today?
Yeah, so for me, it hopefully just gives me a sensitivity to it. Because the research and the data, when you're inundated with so many stories and it starts to become figures and you're cataloging things, it can get easy to kind of think of this as a black and white problem that, I'm just cataloging and lose the humanity of it, versus having a background as an author, luckily being surrounded by so many wonderful artists and authors. It gives you a sense of the real human impact of this, that there are real people who are being hurt by these book bans. These are not faceless, nameless books. There are real authors who have poured their hearts, their identities, their stories into these books, only to have them, a bunch of insane rhetoric, hurtful rhetoric, to be used around it. Around them, it feels personal. So for me as a researcher looking at this, it helps keep it personal. And for me, I can't take away my identities from this when I see these attacks. I am queer, I am Brazilian. So when I see, similar types of stories, people who look like me, people who speak like me, people who experience love the same way I do, when I see those attacked, that feels personal. So it helps, I like the fact that it helps ground me as a
Mhm.
researcher.
Mhm.
And it also just gives me a wonderful community that when things feel really bleak and when I've read far too many stories that, feel deeply personal but are being attacked, that it helps me continue to have a community of support and care throughout those times so that I don't just give up.
Yeah, yeah. Please don't just give up, because
Yeah,
we
try
we
not to.
we need so many voices and people that are advocating, because it's easy in our culture to take for granted our freedoms, and when it's time to really fight or advocate, it sometimes takes the masses a while to catch on to what's going on, right? A lot of ground has been gained by opposition because people are struggling to live their day to day lives. And so those people who are early on the ground, who are early advocating and fighting, are so critical to where we go in our society. I was listening to one of your previous conversations with Kathy Fleischer on her podcast, and you described book banning as a mounting crisis. That just struck me when I heard that. And what makes this moment so urgent? What's changing that people need to understand?
Oh God, the fact that this continues to be relevant is what's so deeply. I did that interview, feels like eons ago, and it continues to only get worse and worse and worse. And that, I think, is what's really staggering about it, is the amount of literature that we're able to track that's been banned and removed and restricted in some way, is what feels like the threat. And the fact that this escalation has only continued. This started with groups, these so-called advocacy groups on the ground. They were advocating to remove books, but asking for, these materials to be restricted. And then that went up to the state level. And now we see state legislation that is causing, censorship of districts. Now it's gone all the way up to the Supreme Court with a recent case that was heard there that basically gave parents religious opt-out rights to opt out of materials like LGBTQ plus materials from elementary classrooms. That's an oversimplification, but what we're seeing is that it's a bit of this, give a mouse a cookie kind of thing, that it's like, oh, we'll just, at the district level, we'll just give up these handful of books. But suddenly that's only created more like sweeping amounts of censorship, so that so many other books that people, you shouldn't have given any of the books. This idea of free expression has to be widely applied for it not to be used to target a wide array of literature. And what we're seeing now is the ramifications of that ever expanding circle of censorship.
You mentioned Supreme Court decision pertaining to schools and what's happening in schools. And I think when we sometimes see through media, particularly legacy media, and maybe even on social media, you see the fight being taken to the public school library or some sort of a school board conversation or meeting. That brings me to my next question I'd like to ask, which is, you've noted that these bans are very school centered. Why do schools and school libraries, why have they become the main battleground, and what does that mean for students and the teachers and the parents collectively?
Yeah, and I should note public libraries are also facing this. It started, and you're right, it has been supercharged in school districts because it largely started as a parents' rights
Mhm,
argument against
mhm.
students' rights, mind you. But it's and that's not really the correct term for it, because whose parents have those rights? Because there are many parents who are fighting against these book bans and want these books available for their students, and that it's a vocal minority of people who aren't necessarily even associated with the school district who are causing these bans in books to become unavailable to entire districts based on their ideologies. So it's absolutely detrimental, especially to the teachers and the educators who are facing threats, the librarians who are facing harassment threats, who are there's cases of people bringing books to sheriff's offices and wanting librarians arrested for having those available, which is completely insane. But then it's the students who really lose out. They're losing out on content that was picked for them. Because that's the thing about a school library. It's already a librarian likely has, a master's degree in library sciences and is choosing what's pedagogically appropriate for students, and is choosing for a wide, diverse array of students. Not every book is for every student, but there needs to be a book there for every student. And students have the right, they should have the right to go to a library and pick out materials that reflect their own lived experiences and that also become lifelines to them about what's going on in their young lives, and encourages them to, do it in a space that's not the internet or a Google search. A place that's cultivated and that has adults around who can help them through the different situations. But the books oftentimes are the first kind of soft introduction to a topic where they can find the language to be able to talk about different experiences, both positive and negative, that are happening to them. And they notice when those materials get banned. When stories about Black history get banned, Black students notice that. They feel personally attacked. Queer students
Sure.
as well, with books about queer identity. So it's hugely detrimental, because even if a school district is just caving to the demands of the state, it still sends a clear signal to those students that that's your school that is supposed to be for you, to protect you, will cave to the demands of these larger forces, even if it's detrimental to you, and even if it sends a bad message about your importance in that school.
Ooh, I love so much what you said. Not every book is right for every student, but every student has the right to access a book that is right for them. Oh my God, that right there, that sums up everything that we're saying. That's so incredibly important. And I'm just wondering, I was just thinking back myself, going to the library as a kid and finding books that mattered to me, and I've always had a wide range of interests. I'd like to read everything I can. As you can see from my books back here, there's a wide range of topics. I was rearranging them last night categorically and seeing what I'm lacking or want more of. And so that is so important. What does reading mean to you personally? And was there a book that transformed the way that you saw the world, particularly stating that you are queer, you are also part Brazilian, and what what does reading mean to you? What books jumped out at you?
Yeah, so reading has been hugely influential in my life. I was an English major, so maybe that's the
Mm.
understatement of the century. But I grew up in Brazil, and the way I really learned and practiced my English was through books. And the way I could culturally engage with American culture was largely through books. And I had a mother who was hugely supportive of my reading habits. If I said I liked a book, even if it was a series, she'd go and buy me the 10 books of that series immediately. And I always had literature in different languages available to me to be able to practice that and to be able to feel comfortable in my own languages, which I think it was hugely validating to my identity. But then when I moved to the United States, I was pretty much entering middle school at that point. And it was important that I felt like I was connected to the other students, to other potential friends through this cultural experience. And it's how I was able to juggle those multiple identities. And then later on in life, as I was figuring out my own queer identity, it was a book. I was reading a book where it's not even, it's a central theme in it, but it's not even about that. It's Untamed by Glennon Doyle, which is not even in school libraries, although I argue it could be. But it was hearing about that author's story with her own queer identity and seeing myself in it that made me realize, like, oh, okay, this is what I've been feeling this entire time and could not put words to. And that's what, the really brave thing that authors do for us, that writers do for us, is they put words to their own feelings and thoughts and experiences in a way that you can say, oh my gosh, it's not just me. Like I now know I have a language, I can communicate with other people. And that's, that communication is the only way you can work through these things and you can form bonds with other people. And time again, it's been shown that our bonds with other people through these experiences, both positive and negative, are the main factors towards how we deal with emotions of happiness and shame and how we're able to basically get to the other side in a good position and be able to then share that happiness with other people. So to me, books and stories are the connection between humans. That is what that does for us. So it's been, for me personally, but then for me too, just thinking culturally and as somebody who likes to be really grounded in their community, they're the essential, they're the backbone, they're the language, they're the biggest connection that we have between each other.
And it's so incredibly personal,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that I know there have been times when I have, collected books or people have given books to me and they've sat on a shelf for sometimes a couple of years. And one day, for whatever reason, I will pick up a particular book, and the words literally leap off the page. And I feel that this is the answer that I've been looking for right here in this particular book that's speaking to me at this particular moment in time. And so for someone else to say, you shouldn't read that book or you don't should not have access to that, they're now making a decision for me, something that could be transformative in my life, and yet someone else says I have the right to decide what you should or should not read. That's
Yeah,
what this basically boils down to.
exactly.
Um,
And just to jump off of that
yeah,
too, books themselves are neutral. They're just pages, sometimes on a Kindle, sometimes physical in ink,
that's
our
right.
reaction to them, whether we're having a positive or negative reaction to them, is what brings meaning to them. And everybody has a right to be able to engage with that, and not just be given books with ideas that you're just supposed to agree with. That makes no sense. That critical
Right.
thinking aspect is really missing from that argument when you say that. And exposure alone is not going to cause someone to be able to change their mind. Like, I read so many straight books, it did not make me straight, believe me. Like,
Right.
at this point in my
Right.
lifetime, I've probably still read more straight books than gay books. I'm still gay. So, like, that is not, it wasn't exposure to Untamed by Glennon Doyle that turned me queer. It was the fact that I was already queer, and it gave me a language that I could work through and relate to. So that is going to be there regardless. We are just
That's right.
reflecting, it is just reflecting back what's already within us. So the idea that the exposure to these ideologies is going to create something. I read books that I think are, abhorrent. Like, I hate them. Like, the
Yeah.
ideas within them, they're
That's right.
terrible. I hate them, the ideologies. But it's important that I can still engage with them and I can think for myself, and I'm fostering those skills. And I really would challenge anyone to read a book in its entirety and say you agree with every single word within it.
Not to um, go totally left field here, but you just made me think of what's happening right now with the horrific um, assassination of Charlie Kirk, and the fact that people agree or vehemently disagree with him. But at the end of the day, everyone believes and agrees that he has the right to his opinions, to share his opinions, to advocate for his beliefs. And that is so fundamental to our American values. And so it's the same thing. I'm hoping that, and we don't know ultimately where this is going to go, but things do happen for a reason, and oftentimes we do not understand fully or comprehend entirely what those reasons are, but we get glimmers of hope, we get shards of light where we go, oh, perhaps there can be some good. And I think one of the important topics and conversations that we have to continue having in our country is the right to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to read, to communicate, and to be who we are as an individual and work together collectively as a society to make a better country and a better world.
Yes, agreed. And you're right. It's important that people are able to freely speak their minds without violence, without murder. And it's important too that, the backlash to this that I've been disappointed by has been to continue to create more censorship.
That's right.
And to me, that's like, no, wasn't that the opposite of the point here? So
That's right.
hopefully this does bring an inflection point where we realize that the way forward is to be able to create spaces where these ideas can be shared, because I think that's also an important element, that sometimes we think the ideas should just be thrown out there, but
That's right.
without us cultivating an environment and a culture for that, it leaves us where we are now.
It does. Let's shift a little bit to this October. We're super excited because it's Read Out Across America. For those who may not know, Read Out Across America is a national week of action running October 5th through the 11th. It's a celebration of the freedom to read and a direct response to censorship. And across the country, authors, educators, librarians, and everyday citizens will gather to read banned and challenged books out loud. I'm super excited about this. I once read because there was I think several years back they were banning To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I mean, no, no, yes, Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird. And I love To Kill a Mockingbird. And my seventh grade English teacher read To Kill a Mockingbird to us aloud. And so I wound up reading it on YouTube, posting it somewhere. And so I'm super excited about this year, this Read Out Across America this October. Anyway, in libraries and schools and bookstores, even on social media, people will be reading aloud and sharing all the different books that have been banned. The idea is simple, but it's powerful. When we read these books publicly, we reclaim the stories that others are trying to erase. It's about visibility, resistance, and dare I say, joy. And anyone can take part, whether by hosting a local event or simply sharing a reading online. So, what does read out mean to you, and why is it such a powerful response to censorship?
Yeah, no, to me, I mean, both this is twofold, like the concept of reading out loud and making reading such a community activity and allowing us to sit in our emotions of whatever is happening within the story is really appealing. But I love that this is the actual week, that this is a celebration of
Yeah.
books. So much right now is heavy. Believe me, I'm sitting in the heavy and every day as I'm working towards doing the research that I do. But it's also, you're so right, it's joyful. There's a reason we're fighting for these stories, is because they give us hope, they give us meaning, they give us light in life. And to me, I love this idea of seeing it through a celebratory lens.
Yeah, yeah, I do too. I'm super excited. I know so many people are, and I'm gonna find some books that I want to read aloud. Let's go back to PEN America. In your role at PEN America, you track censorship and you track attacks on schools and libraries. What trends are you seeing that are most urgent right now?
Yeah, so you've already hit upon a lot of them, but the attack on education, the public school system as a whole, and you can use school book bans as a bellwether for that, but I mean, schools are being attacked in so many different ways. Their funding is being attacked. Teachers are being asked to wear too many hats. The constant threat of violence on campus. It's too much, and it's designed to break down the system. It's designed to put public schools in this place, in order to find other, force parents into feeling like they need to find other replacements, force places and communities into not funding their schools because they think that it's not going where it's supposed to go. But that's all surface level, because it's actually a much more pernicious attack, and it's purposely orchestrated to be able to take down public schools as an institution, as something that's accessible and free to our citizenry, and that whose job is to create citizens who are critical thinkers, who can think for themselves, who can learn these different skill sets that they can bring forth into other parts of their life. And unfortunately, I feel like it's really designed to break it down and start to go towards the voucher system, the privatization, and really just making public education look completely different than we've ever seen it in this country before. So that to me is a huge trend that we're seeing. But another one, kind of relatedly, and unfortunately, these are not, as catchy as a number, and that somebody's going to want to report on. But the breaking of processes, and I see that across the country, where there are these processes that we're supposed to adhere to. There are rules that we've all agreed to, and some people are just ignoring them. It's a superintendent who, even though they don't have the power to take a book away, they just decide to take a book away. It's putting together a review committee within a school district, and the review committee reads the book, has recommendations, says the book should stay on shelves. This is an important book, and then the school board says, no, we're just going to remove that. It's a state saying, I don't care that your community has voted on keeping this book. We're the state, and we're telling you you have to get rid of it. And that's something that we're seeing across the board, and that's an example within book bans, but we're seeing that across the country, where there are rules that we all thought we knew and we followed, and that kept, the system of checks and balances in place, and they're not being adhered to anymore. So I find that extremely worrying towards, us as a democratic society, that it doesn't feel democratic anymore.
It doesn't feel democratic anymore that individuals and groups are willfully breaking laws, precedents, changing the rules of the game without the collective group discussing it and all agreeing to those shifts, and they're just willfully doing it. And so that feels it's incredibly unsettling, but also very dangerous because it's sending us into a direction that we literally have to fight against in order to maintain the kind of freedom um, that we believe in here in our country. I want to take a quick pause here just to say thank you to the volunteers of Defense of Democracy. None of this work happens without volunteers. Every single step forward, whether it's organizing events, defending a library, or lifting up young voices, it's powered by people who give their time and energy. So thank you to all of our volunteers. And if you're listening and feel inspired to join us, especially during Read Out Across America, please reach out to Defense of Democracy. We'd love to connect you with ways to get involved. All right, let's get back to it. We're talking a lot about schools, young people, changes that are happening in our society. For young people who are watching books disappear from their classrooms, what message do you want them to hear?
Oh my gosh, there's so many people fighting for you. It
Mm,
can feel very isolating, both as a young person and but also, just anyone in the school system. It can feel very isolating that this is happening only within your school district or only within your state. But we're not giving up on anyone or anything. So that means that I'm from Florida. After I moved from Brazil, I moved to Florida. I'm Floridian. I did, all of the rest of my public education there, including both my collegiate degree at the University of Florida and then my master's at UCF, University of Central Florida. We're not giving up on Florida. We're not giving up on southern states. We're not giving up on districts that seem like, have banned hundreds of books. We are not giving up. So it's horrible. You shouldn't have to be going through this. I always say, people ask, well, how can students get engaged? And I'm like, they shouldn't. They shouldn't need to. Adults are messing this up. Students should not need to be the ones, coming in and cleaning it up. And they are doing a fantastic job. They are fighting hard, and their voices are the most important in this. But at the same time, they should also get to just be students who are not experiencing the current climate of this country. Should get to be, elementary, middle, and high schoolers who are enjoying and experiencing the things that normally one would experience at that time without all this extra heavy stuff. So I would say, we've got you. We're fighting. We'll keep trying. And make sure you're connected to a community of care around you, which includes, there are a lot of adults who still want to be helpful and supportive. So you have each other as students, but also please reach out to the caring adults in your life, who are willing to support you. And there's a large movement that is fighting for you.
I love that. And I've been really privileged to talk with a lot of incredible young people who are so bright. And I feel like, thank God, because we're looking at the future, and these young people are really stepping up to the plate. And I love that you say that we've got you and that we're standing for and with you. You know, a lot of people do feel, a lot of listeners feel overwhelmed by the scale of book bans and what's happening. What practical actions can just everyday people take today?
Yeah. So my big thing is get local, get vocal. That is the advice I have for people. And believe me, as somebody who's looking at the national picture at all times, it is so overwhelming. For me, the way I manage to deal with it and the way that works for me is to become, really plugged into my local community. I'm not going to be able to, other than the work I do in bringing, public awareness to the national picture, that's about what I can do nationally. But I can make a huge impact in my local community, in my own school districts, in my own libraries, even in city council meetings. But becoming really engaged in what's happening around you, it not only is the most impact you can make as an advocate, it also is going to fuel you and ground you, because you need to have that community of care. I've mentioned this, but you need to have those people around you who are going to keep you going. So for me, like, I try to create, even relationships with people who might not necessarily be in this work, but we're aligned in values of what we want our community to look like, and get plugged in with them and to be able to have those conversations and feel supported by them. So that can, I also say, choose your brand of advocacy. If you're
Mhm.
someone who hates public speaking, don't go speak at a school board meeting, because then you will do it once, you will hate it, and then you will never do it again, and then you're not in the movement anymore. So if you're someone like that, don't do that. But if you're someone like, I always think of my own mother, she is a caretaker. What she should be doing is baking cookies for the librarians of the local library and giving it to them and having conversations, saying, hey, what's going on? How's your week been? Oh, you've had some book challenges? What can I do to help? And being also vocal in our support. A lot of what we hear is people being vocal after there's been a problem. I always say try to be proactive. So if you're going to your local library, thank them for having that pride display, and thank them. And if you want to put it in writing, even better, because then when there's a complaint made, when they say, well, I don't want those queer books to be in the library, the librarian can say, well, I have 5 letters right here thanking me for having this available. So okay, 1 to 5, 5 still wins. So you need to be a little bit more vocal in keeping these institutions that we thought, we are taking for granted. We thought were just guarantees within our society, whether that's our own school systems, but our local libraries as well.
Get in where you fit in.
Yeah.
And you can make a difference. We've just about rounded out our conversation. I just want to end with a couple more questions, which basically are focused on you. Where do you personally find hope in this fight, and what keeps you grounded and motivated?
Oh gosh, people are my hope. And I've asked other advocates, because I feel like I'm rather young in my advocate journey. It's been several years. I'm getting into the middle of it, but I was like, how do you keep the hope? Not just for me and my book ban work, but everything. I feel like every time I look at the news, I'm like, oh my God, like I just want to crawl back into the covers. But it's other people, and knowing they've got my back, and knowing that there are days when, I might be researching bans and there's some homophobic crap really that I can't look at anymore. I can't look at it. And my research partner, Dr. Taslim Magnuson, also a queen in this work, says, I got you. I'll do these, I can go over there. So taking that time to create community, I feel like sometimes is a step we skip. We just want to get to the work. And it's like, the work will be better served and better done if we're in community with each other, and making sure you have those different communities of care. I'll say it again, around you, and supportive people who are in the fight with you. I also think it's important, I think we all have friends who are probably unplugged in some ways. And it's like you get kind of frustrated because you're like, no, engage. And it's okay to have those friends, but make sure you also have people who are like standing alongside you in the fight, who are on the front lines right beside you, going to hold your hand through it. Like you need to have those people who through the thick and thin of this engagement are going to have your back. And I think that's what keeps you going, that if you need to take a day or a step back, or you have a bad experience, you have someone you can talk to, and that you feel like you're doing it for a reason, instead of this kind of like larger, do it for democracy. It's like, what does that really mean? Versus do it for this neighbor. You can look them in the eye and say, I'm doing this for them. That's going to be, way more nourishing than some larger concept.
It really personalizes it also. I love that. Just bring it back to your own personal values and the people the company you keep, the people you love, the people that you're connected to. I love that. This has been so great to chat with you. You're really so insightful, and I love that you're doing the work. And I had a chance to see you making the rounds and talking on different podcasts a little bit. It's again, it's just great to see that you're in it and that you work with a team of people that are in it, because we know that none of us can do it all individually by ourselves. It requires all of us working together. But as of right now, you happen to be a face that is out there and a voice that is out there. And so you very much are appreciated. Lastly, if you could leave listeners with one call to action for Banned Books Week and beyond, what would that be?
Get engaged locally, particularly your school boards, your city council, and whatever's happening in your library. Just find out what's happening. The first step is just gathering information. So Google your own district, your own county, and figure out if there's book bans happening there. feel those emotions, and then decide to do one thing about it. Write to one person, attend one meeting, talk to one neighbor. But the first step is really realizing that this is in your backyard. And I guarantee you, as somebody who's looking individually at all the districts in the country, it's happening in your backyard in some capacity or another. So
Wow.
go and look that up.
Wow, that's really interesting because I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I'm sure it's happening here, but I don't hear of it very much. And in fact, I was just uh, getting ready to go to a local bookstore here, and they have a spacious room in the back, and I thought, oh, this might be a great venue to read aloud. And I started wondering, I'm curious to see if they have been affected or some of the local libraries in my community have been affected. So it's something that I definitely want to get more involved with and understand what's happening here in my own backyard. With that being said, we want to leave our listeners on a high note. What are you looking forward to next in your life?
Oh, next in my life.
Mhm.
I don't know. I would say I can't give a good book ban example. It's pretty bad out there. It's pretty bleak. But personally in my life, I do try to carve out a lot of time as an advocate to still be human. So I'm looking forward to sewing things. I love to sew. I'm looking forward to
Oh,
walking my dog and spending time with my girlfriend. And I've been thinking a lot about when the world feels so heavy about everyday pleasures, things that whatever larger government structure I'm in, I'm going to enjoy regardless as everyday pleasures and really cherish them as part of my routine.
remember to be human. That's important in all of this and everything that we do to breathe, to exhale, and to connect with ourselves, our with nature, with our people. Sabrina, you have been an absolute joy and pleasure. Thank you so much for being my guest today on this podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for giving me the time and the space to be able to share what Penn America is doing. And like you said, I'm just a face of many other advocates and people here who are working hard and doing such wonderful work. And I'm really honored to have had that opportunity to speak to it.
Well, much success, continued success, and we will talk again. For those of you that have been listening, thank you so much. This is Defense of Democracy podcast. I'm Addison K. Witt, and if you believe in fighting for our democracy and protecting the basic right to read, I invite you to become a member of Defense of Democracy and take part in Read Out across America. We cannot do this work without you. Your voice, your time, and yes, your financial support make all the difference. Together, we can make sure every voice and every story has a place in our future. Freedom for one is freedom for all. See you next time.